So the last winding that we tried to do, or the first rewind, it got hot, broke down the insulation on the wire, and arced through on the screw right here. So what we did was we took a look at how we had wound it, and this is how we did it for the run coil, and this is what failed. We had it coming in and consistently looping around. Let's if we start over here on this side, coming in, looping around, looping through the inner coil, and coming over the next side. The same pattern repeating all the way across. And this is just the general direction of where it would flow. This is not a current diagram or electrical diagram of any kind that describes that, just something to kind of note where the fields would be. And this is what we're going to try, where it actually reverses. So we come in on this side, flow around, and then you can see that instead of the arrows all being opposite between each set, they are actually aligned with each other. And with this one, if we go into a circle, you can see that between these are almost opposite. So this one is down and this one over here is up, and that's not quite where we need to be. With this one that we're going to try, we have both of these going up and both of these going up, so they're consistent with how it will be pulling the current. We have we've rewound the coils. The large one has 220 individual wires per slot. The second large one has 150 wires per slot, and these we kept the same. I believe it's 90 and 70. 90 on the large, 70 on the small. And we have gone in on the right, out on the left for each of the coil sets. And we're going to connect these together based on the new diagram. We're going to add the insulation paper between. We will not varnish it until after we've tested it. We'll do a really brief test. We're not going to try to overheat it like we did the last time and let it fail, because we're going to connect these far enough away that if we need to make changes, we'll be able to make changes without damaging this current winding. And because we have enough extra wire, we'll be able to choose and control how that is. We had better luck this time with putting the coils in, and that when the coil came in for the first one, we were then able to make an adjustment which let us have a much better piece between the two. See if I can find one that's really clear. Yeah, the connection wire that bridges between one and the other, in this case it's back here. You can see the wire is much tighter. This is the wire I'm talking about right there. It's much tighter coming into the next, or the outer loop, for each of the poles. We were consistent across all of it that time. This is 26 AWG wire, and this is 30 for the start winding. We'll get this soldered up, get it insulated, get it back into the motor and connect it up, and we'll pick up there. Nothing's flowing through it now, which is correct. Okay, so we got the motor back together temporarily, put it on the electrics and fired it up, and it ran. I think the starter might be weak, but there's also a little bit of a mechanical problem right now with its it is hard to turn inside of there. I don't know if it's a bearing that's bound or if the whole thing is bound, but we're going to take it back apart and feel for heat. See, it's pretty tight in there. The bearings are nice and loose. We didn't insulate the motor correctly this time. We just wanted to try and make sure that the winding directions were correct. Feels nice. Looks like the motor, the rotor was rubbing on this piece of insulation and on that piece of insulation, on that one right there. So these are things that we're going to correct when we pull the windings back out. That'll free up any kind of drag whatsoever on the rotor. It's not perfect, and then we'll get a new ICG1 starter relay. So we finished up winding all the coils for the stator, for the indexer on the grinder, and we ran our test. And then what I did was I came back and I soldered all the leads together short. I put the input wires on correctly, and then what I did was I used twine and pulled all the coils tight together. The next thing we're going to do, probably tomorrow once it stops raining and dries out just a little bit, is we're going to revarnish all of these coils. Just pour it over the top gently, and I'm going to make sure that each one of these insulator pieces of fish tape are pushed all the way in correctly and not in a condition where they can come out and rub on the motor. Everything's pulled back now, so there's plenty of room inside of here to get these pushed back in, and it might just be a simple matter of pushing them back and letting the varnish pull it in and keep it in. The next thing that came up was the motor itself. At least the stator, or the rotor, was having trouble, it seemed like, spinning inside. So inside here there's an old seal, and the old rubber seal in here had just gotten really worn out and soft. So I just took a look at it and noticed that there's a crack. There's no way this can be seen, but there's a small crack right here in the old seal. I'm gonna leave that. We'll put enough oil in to lubricate the gearing as it sits at about this angle. And here's the here's how the stator turns in here now. See, it should have always been like that, but it was never quite that much once this other piece gets on. So what we end up with is that where earlier today, before or while we were trying to start it, you could turn it, it wouldn't freely spin at all. And then on top of that, once we had all the windings wrapped and pulled back, we don't have any kind of interference between the stator and the rotor, or at least between the stator and the pickle. And this is complete. Other than getting it varnished and back together, we do have a new start relay coming in the mail. It should be here sometime next week. Here's a close-up. You can see the wrappings and the windings. Yeah, pretty cool. Off camera, we went ahead and put the red varnish on and let it dry. What that's doing is we've sealed in all of the fish tape insulation back inside each one of the slots. That's nice and clean. We tried the fits nicely. We're going to start off by putting this back together. One thing I want to do is I want to put a fish tape piece of insulation around here, since we did have that issue with the screws before. Just one layer and then a piece of tape around each side. that high in each case. That'll be just fine. Okay. Just wanted to keep this paper from binding on that little step inside where the stator goes up against. There we go. And there. And then there. Now there's these spacers that pull the screws forward. Okay. And we'll put some of the original winding paper back in. They had this here as additional insulation. The stator, or the rotor. Seated nicely. Plenty of wire to work with. It's black and white, red and green. What the?
The big fat kid was growling at the small fat kid. There must have been food involved.
That's hardcore. I like it. And this black one will go here. We're going to keep this open because we do need to test the rest of it later on. So let's get this back over the machine. So we set the motor back on the indexer. It's not completely tightened down. It's plugged in. Turning this way. Turning that way. It does run really well. It's still getting hot. Definitely replacing the relay.